Welcome, folks, to this edition of the 700 Club. This is the day the Lord hath made, and we will rejoice and be glad in it. So I hope you find this a happy program and good stuff for you. But I want to say the pressure on the president and Congress to act quickly on police reform is more intense than ever. The killing of a black man by Atlanta police sparked new protests and more violence over the weekend. What police reforms are on the table to bring peace? And what's the poison pill that could stop them? Gary Lane has that.
The death of Rayshard Brooks has been ruled a homicide. The police shooting was captured in dramatic video outside the Wendy's restaurant, where Brooks had failed several sobriety tests and then tried to run from police. He resisted arrest and fled after seizing a police taser. An officer shot and killed him as he fled, pointing the taser in their direction. Brooks' wife says he wasn't dangerous.
I didn't know that I was going to wake up to my husband never coming home.
Protesters set fire to the Wendy's. Atlanta Police Chief Erica Shields resigned in the wake of the shooting. Police officer Garrett Rolfe was fired, and another officer was suspended. The Atlanta shooting gives a renewed sense of urgency to police reform legislation. Both Congress and the president are expected to act this week. Democrats are pushing to end qualified immunity, which shields officers like Rolfe from civil lawsuits.
We have to ask ourselves as a society, do we want to have a nation where police officers who do really awful things cannot be held accountable to civil rights charges?
But the president and other Republicans say qualified immunity is off the table. Senator Tim Scott calling it a poison pill that will kill police reform legislation.
That sends a wrong signal, perhaps the worst signal right now in America.
Scott has been working on police reform for 5 years. Republicans have tasked him with drafting a proposal in the Senate. Key points are improved officer training and greater transparency when wrongdoing occurs. Also, Scott and others support banning chokeholds.
That is one of the things that we should have engaged in a long time ago. Many departments around the country have already banned chokeholds, and I think a lot of other departments are increasing that now.
President Trump expected to sign an executive order this week setting a national standard for police. He agrees chokeholds should be banned except in certain situations.
But if a police officer is in a bad scuffle and he's got somebody,
well, if it's a one-on-one fight for the life,
yeah, and that does happen, and that does happen.
But
too. So you have to be careful. With that being said, it would be, I think, a very good thing that, generally speaking, it should be ended.
Ben Carson, Trump's only black cabinet member, says it's time for Americans to come together and calmly share their multiple perspectives.
We have to stop, putting everything into the arena of combat. And let's see if we can find a way to work together, because if we don't, we're doomed.
And some rays of hope, healing, and grace. Amazing Grace, shared over the weekend in Nashville. These Christians took to song outside a nightclub recently looted by rioters.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound.
Gary Lane, CBN News.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've got to come together and recognize, like it or not, we're all one race, really. We're all descended from Adam and Eve, and, so there's a little bit of pigmentation different, a little bit of facial characteristics different. But at the same time, we've got to be careful we don't go overboard. We can't allow one group to take over a whole block of a city and declare it an independent zone. We can't allow one group to say we're going to take away the police and defund them. We can't just have a lawless nation. And, I ask our staff to give us a breakdown of the population by race in this country. And here's what they found. 60% of the American people are considered white. That would include many of the Middle Eastern people. 18% are Hispanic or Latino. The blacks only make up 13.4%, and Asians are 5.9%. So if we're going to look after people, we've also got to look after the Hispanics. They are a larger proportion of our people than blacks are. And Asians are almost half as many, and we need to look after them. So we can't just give all the law and all the appointments and all the attention to the one segment of our population, 13.4%. Now, I'm pleased to report at Regent University, our population, 23% of our students are African American, and I'm just delighted because they're wonderful people, and they're achieving a great deal, and they're our Christian brothers and sisters. And that's what we need to do, is recognize these are our brothers and sisters. But so are the Latinos, so are the Hispanics, so are our Asian friends. And we've got to remember, as a nation, we can't just tilt everything in relation to one particular interest group and to the exclusion of others. We have to look after all of us. It's all the people. And I just think it's very important to recognize that one group shouldn't mistreat another, and we've got to deal with this matter of police brutality. We've got to do it. Well, CBN Chief Political Analyst David Brody joins us now. And David, given the latest incident on the death of Floyd, what needs to be done in Washington, do you think, to move this thing forward?
Well, I think there's a compromise to be reached, and the reason, Pat, for that is that both sides want it. Our Republicans want something done, Democrats do too, and this president needs to get something done with all of the chorus in this country clamoring for something to get done. So usually what happens here in Washington is that when there's a will to get it done, there's somehow a way to get it done, and I think you'll see somehow some compromise. When I say compromise, I'm talking about some sort of agreement, middle ground on chokeholds as to what both parties feel they can come to an agreement about. But beyond chokeholds, you know, you're looking at there's a lot of other issues as it relates to potential no-knock raids and many other things, specifically whether or not police should get immunity from prosecution on certain issues. And there's a lot to be dealt with. But I will just say that I think with Donald Trump, you know, the way he has handled all of this, I think comes into question here as it relates to, he calls himself the law and order president. But, you know, there is a balance between law and order in the Bible, Romans 13:1, obey authorities and all of that. And then, of course, compassion in the Bible, a central theme of the Bible. And I think for Donald Trump, it's always been a struggle for him to get that right balance. He's got the law and order part down right. He can work a little bit on the compassion side of it, too.
Well, the president is restarting a campaign in Tulsa, and Tulsa, I understand, was the scene of an absolutely horrible massacre of black people back in the 1920s or so. You want to talk about that?
Well, that's right, Juneteenth, and he decided to move that it was supposed to be June 19th. He's moved it one day later to June 20th, and a smart move. The media saying he caved in, but, you know, caved or not caved, the bottom line is he did the right thing by moving it to June 20th. I think the bigger issue now becomes you're going to have this in an indoor arena with potentially 19,000, 20,000 or so folks, and now the coronavirus police, if you will, are out in force saying, well, wait a minute, you know, what about spreading the coronavirus around? Well, we've seen with the George Floyd protest and other protests all over the country that social distancing hasn't been used at all. But now the media is saying, well, hey, wait a minute, this is indoors, so it's different than outdoors, and this is what you're going to get. So Trump's got to deal with the media on this too, but he also has to deal with Joe Biden. And, you know, Joe Biden pretty much has a basement strategy here. And what I mean by that is slow as he goes. In other words, keep him in the basement for the most part and trot him out when you need to. Don't make too many mistakes. That's what Joe Biden's campaign is pretty much thinking, you know, because Joe Biden has three opponents, right? I mean, he's got to take on Donald Trump. He's got to take on the far left in his party. He's got to take on himself. He's a human gas machine, and so he's got some issues too, and that's where he's at.
You remember, years ago, he was, you know, accused of plagiarizing Neil Kinnock's speeches, and he was pretty much taken out of politics. Now he's had a great resurgence. Who's on his short list for VP? It looks like he's going to pick a black woman. He's talking about Kamala Harris now as the top of the list. Who do you think?
Yeah, I came out a few weeks ago and said Kamala Harris, I think, will most likely be the pick. I mean, you never know exactly, but I think she fits the moment right now, especially after George Floyd. But there's a lot more to Kamala Harris. She's been vetted to a degree, not fully, but she's been vetted because she ran for president. So there's some of that, which is a good thing for the Biden campaign. In addition, she is a former attorney general, so she has somewhat of a law and order card to play if he needs to. And she is obviously an African-American woman, which will help on the far left side of that problem that we just talked about for Biden. Some others, potentially Susan Rice, the former national security advisor. You've got Val Demings, you've got Keisha Lance Bottoms down in Atlanta, the mayor there who had that rousing speech after the riots in Atlanta a few weeks ago. So there are some possibilities, but I think it's probably Kamala Harris. Susan Rice has a potential as well, but we'll see. I can tell you this, Pat, from Biden's perspective, he would be smart to take a page from the Obama playbook. You know, in 2008, President Obama spoke with CBN News 4 times, or Barack Obama, the candidate, spoke with CBN News 4 times. He ended up winning 26% of the white evangelical vote in 2008. In 2012, he got 21% of that vote. Hillary Clinton only got 16% of the white evangelical vote. In other words, the Trump base. And why? Well, she decided not to talk about her faith and not play to the audience. Look, the truth of the matter is, we know, Pat, and you know, elections are won at the margins. And if Joe Biden can pick off a percentage or two of white evangelicals that are frustrated with Trump and he wants to appeal to their better angels and more compassion, it's there for the taking, but he has to engage. And I think that's something we'll watch here at CBN.
Well, David, thank you so much for that analysis, and we will look eagerly at it. Okay, well, in other news, Tulsa's top health official is calling on the president to postpone his rally. Ephraim Grimm has more on that.
Thank you.
Pat, the city's health department director warns this week's rally is risky and could cause a surge in COVID-19 cases. But Oklahoma Senator Republican James Lankford says it will be safe and he intends to go. The Trump administration is asking attendees to sign a waiver promising not to sue if they do get the virus. About 19,000 are expected to attend. This comes as 22 states are seeing an increase in new coronavirus cases. Arizona and Texas set new records for hospitalizations. And 2 states, Utah and Oregon, are now slowing their reopening process. Israel is moving ahead with a new Jewish community in the Golan Heights named after President Donald Trump. It will be called Ramat Trump, which is Hebrew for Trump Heights, and it will be home to 300 families. Israel recaptured the Golan Heights from Syria in the 1967 Six-Day War. Most of the international community considers it to be occupied by Israel, but the Trump administration said in March of last year the U.S. recognized it as under Israeli sovereignty. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu confirmed the move Sunday, the president's 74th birthday. Pat?
Well, it's a nice birthday president, I should say. You know, let's face it, the 2-state solution is not going to work as long as there's one factor that denies the legitimacy of the other one and says the other one should be eliminated, and that's the position of the Palestinian Authority. So that's part of Eretz Israel, the land of Israel, and the West Bank. It's Judea and Samaria. It's one of the homelands of Israel, and they're going to. But the Golan Heights, particularly, I mean, that shouldn't be even under discussion as anybody else. I mean, the Israelis fought one of the great tank battles in the history of warfare to take the Golan, and they certainly shouldn't give it back.